Hello everyone! Welcome to another exciting Tuesday evening patron-only stream here for the Eventide project. Hi there, I am Jason Bullman. I'm the creator of Eventide and the, well, you know, I say it every time, but you all know. I'm the creator of Pathfinder and the director of game design at Paizo and yada yada yada. Before we get started here today, folks, you knew I was going to get another use out of that intro. If you missed the intro on Saturday, I kind of spent a good chunk of time making that happen, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's the start of probably what will be an entire trailer for Eventide at some point in time when I get enough spare minutes to stitch it together in After Effects and Premiere and yada yada yada. As it turns out, learning how to do all that stuff is time-consuming. I'm enjoying it. It's kind of an interesting puzzle, but it is a lot of work. Today, folks, for those of you who are maybe new here, welcome. We picked up a handful of new patrons here over the past couple of days. Since Saturday, we're now just a few shy of that goal of 100. I think we're probably going to miss it, but only by like 1 or 2, which is good. I'm excited to have more folks here. You know, more folks here means more support, which means I can make things go faster, like art and editing and things like that. So, you know, we'll keep an eye on that as it goes forward. The past week has been a bit of a whirlwind. Obviously, we had PaizoCon in there. That took a great deal of my focus and effort. I had a bunch of panels I had to do. I had to help prep some things for some other folks and, you know, just all the work necessary to get it going. I didn't attend the show in person, but I did do everything online, and I had a good time doing that. I did some Discord chats. I did some AMA. I did, you know, lots of stuff. If you're interested in any of that, you can catch up on that on the Paizo YouTube channel. However, the big thing was Saturday we did an Eventide panel that ended up being hosted by the Paizo Twitch, which was really nice of them. And we had, like, over 100 people hanging out, talking Eventide, so that was really good. Great way to spread some word of mouth about the campaign and get some folks excited about it. If you missed that video, it is now up on YouTube. It is public for everyone. So, you know, it's there, and it's already gotten several hundred views, which is great. That is a good step towards, you know, spreading the word. One of the biggest challenges of starting any new endeavor like this is just getting the word out. As it turns out, getting people to know that you exist is like half the battle. Oh, which is why I have these links down on the bottom. Let me turn these off because we don't need those. You all know. Yeah, you know, if you missed it, it's no big deal. But the panel on Saturday. Honestly, if you've been following along with all of the streams I've done this far, I covered a lot of the same material I've already covered. There's a few new secrets in there, a few new spoilers, a few new little tidbits about what might be going on. But mostly I covered ground that we've already covered because, frankly, I wanted this to be an approachable way for new folks to come and learn about the world. So, there's that. What else do I got going on? A quick update on my groups. One group has entirely missed a session, but that was the group that was a little bit ahead. And I think what I'm going to do this week is because their next session is this week. I think I'm just going to stretch their playtest session and get them mostly caught up. We'll have to play a little bit of a brinksmanship game between the two groups, trying to get them both to the same point again. I always knew they wouldn't stay in lockstep with one another the entire time. But right now I've got one that is like a full session and a half behind the other group. So I'm going to have to work on that. But I am excited because that group meets this week and we're going to get them through a lot of stuff. They are still at the end of part 1. They haven't even started part 2 yet. But they already did the debriefing and split up money and stuff. So all that's left is shopping and then they get to jump right in the other adventure. The other group met last week on Monday and played their session. We talked about that a little bit on Tuesday. But yeah, they've already started. They did a bunch of shopping and stuff like that. To that end, by the way, a lot of the material I used for them while they were exploring Wormbone, some of the shops and lists and stuff, that material is now up on MinotaurGames.com. I did a massive ad late last night to the Wormbone Gazetteer. I put the Wormbone Gazetteer in place and dumped several thousand words in there. So that has the start of the City Gazetteer for GMs. which is filled with kind of secrets and things that the characters wouldn't necessarily know. There's also some adventure hooks in there. There's also like, I'm a big fan of including like lists of goods and services at businesses. Not everything. If they go to the Wandering Owlbear, the Wandering Ogre, which is the kind of general supply shop. Yeah, they have most kind of ordinary adventuring supplies and travel supplies and stuff like that. I'm not going to list it all out. But if you go to the weaponsmith, I list what weapons he has available just right off the get-go. If you want something special, you can make it. When you go to the inns and taverns, I list the price of the rooms and what their general dishes and food are and what those things cost. There's probably more than that, but it's there for inspiration. I do enjoy adding a touch of trying to kind of fill out the world through the senses. This is a big thing I try and do in all my games is I try to engage the players in all 5 senses if possible. While adventuring, it's easy to do sights and smells and things you touch. Taste is really hard to do, but I like to do that back in town when they're eating or when they go out to restaurants and stuff. It just adds a kind of a layer of detail to the world that I appreciate. So yeah, the Wandering Owlbear. There can be plenty. Some of that material is up. I'm going to continue adding to that. The ones that are in there were the ones that were immediately useful to me and my groups because I knew they were going to go shopping for some weapons. I knew they were going to go buy some alchemical stuff, and I knew they needed a place to stay. So those things populated first. I am working on write-ups for that for a bunch of different locations. So over the next week or so, you should see me pop some more of those in as time allows. I got kind of a busy week, but I'm going to work on it. So that happened as well. It's been a busy couple of days here. We get to the end of the month and I get busy. Now tonight, what I'd like to do is talk to all of you and walk you through building the kind of final encounter for part 1. So, and by that, I don't mean single encounter, I mean kind of final encounter area and all that entails. Because what's happening here is, there's, part 1 of Wulfren's fate is everything under the tower up to the point where you get to the locked door that you need the ring to open. And I split that into 2 parts, 2 halves. The first half is already out, you all have it. I have a bunch of notes for that, I'm going to update it here at some point in time, but I'll probably save that for the final PDF version. So there's that. And then the second half of it is when they get access to the floor below, which they alone have access to, and they go down there and are able to explore. There's a lot of interesting things down here. As I've written it and fleshed it out, there's a lot of kind of really interesting details about old relics and artifacts. Like a book written in a language no one in the group can possibly know. But if they decipher it, it's this weird poem that then wanders off into madness. There's, a copy of the letter that Arvanis sent to Queen Hasvrel II, filled with kind of worrisome early conclusions in his studies into Eventide, and then beyond that, you kind of get deeper into the library, and there's a cave fisher hiding in there, and that's the encounter they're about to face. And then beyond that, there's a whole bunch of rats, and meanwhile there's this shadowy hunter that is released. It's this symbol on the floor. I think I actually I think I finally removed it up here. So there's kind of, this ongoing story, and then once they leave the library, they enter the laboratory. And the laboratory is kind of the final main part of this. I don't view the second half of part 1 as being more than, 5 or 6 total kind of areas, and then they're done. I expect it to be another, we do all of this in one adventuring day, and then we're out. I'm doing that very intentionally here in the early going because I want the player characters to constantly have touchstones back in the surface and civilization. I don't want them to be camping down here. I'd much prefer them to kind of finish their explorations, then go back up into town. Gives them a chance to explore the town, gives me a chance to kind of more delineate kind of encounter grouping, and build kind of dramatic set-piece encounters that occur when I think they're going to happen. Right, so that's the behind the scenes on how these two floors came together. The first floor is more of just an endurance bout against a number of, frankly, lower and easier encounters, but there's a lot of them. There's not meant to be a big triumph in encounter design. The big triumph at the end is that you get the key and can go to the second floor, but you're exhausted and need to go rest. That is, in my book, kind of enough of a reward. Now, when we get to the second floor, I want to make sure I end it with a bang, because this is the end of part 1, and it has to sell the kind of importance of this and why the players need to continue their exploration and investigation. So, what I want to do here tonight, now that I've spent 10 minutes doing preamble, what I'd like to do here tonight is walk through building it, because I honestly, that's where I'm at in my writing process right now, is writing this final encounter, this final piece. Once it's done, I'm pretty much done. Now, I'm not going to sit here and type tonight. I think that's boring. But what I am going to try and do is walk you through the actual process of the adventure itself. So I'm going to see if I can get... Let's see. Can I get... Yes, I can. Let me see if I turn this on, what this looks like here. Okay, so that's pretty good. So what you're seeing here is the map. Let me go ahead and zoom out. Spoilers, by the way, this is the second floor, and it's dark right now because I have artificial lighting turned on. Let me go and turn that off. And this is for the Thursday, correct? Yeah. I have dynamic lighting. If I turn that off, it'll become bright and colorful and easy to see. So, this is the second floor, and as you can see, there's kind of, I can use Roll20 tools. There is this is kind of the entrance where they come in. This is the elevator shaft that doesn't work from the first floor. The real kind of exploration begins here in this chamber, and I'll go ahead and zoom in here just to give a sense of what I'm building. Yeah, I'm here. So this chamber has all the relics in it, and this is the weird mysterious symbol on the floor. And then there is this giant patch of brown mold here. This is the cave fisher hiding off over in the corner. Up here are some rats and a rat swarm, some giant rats and a rat swarm. And then, you know, if they don't want to go traipsing through the brown mold, their path will lead them up through the rats and then back down through and into the laboratory. Now, this is the area I'm still designing, which is why it isn't fully decorated yet. You'll notice these areas back here are decorated. They actually contain some interesting brand new pieces that I created for this. I may throw some of these up on the up in the Discord for folks who use blue tiles. I've created some book piles for folks to play around with. So these are piles of books that you can move around and play with. So that's kind of fun. Because what's a library without piles of books to play with? I also created just kind of a loose scroll. There is this section of a tree trunk that is cut out here that I drew very quickly to have on the map. So there's some stuff there. I may throw some of this into the Discord for folks to play around with for those who are using blue tiles in their home game. But yeah, all of this is pretty settled. You know, all of the bookshelves, all the cases, all the stuff like that. There's a statue here that I still need to detail, but But the main event is really here. It's this chamber right here. And this is kind of the main exploration chamber. This is the laboratory, and this is the location for kind of our final set piece encounter. Right? Now, you'll notice I had some tiles on there already, because the one thing I figured out early on when I was doing kind of some encounter mapping was what the initial fight was. But as I begin to think about it, I really want this area to be the capstone of the whole section. So, if I look at their adventuring day, and I want to plan out kind of how they're expending resources. They've got some exploration stuff, not going to spend much there. They've got a fight with a cave fisher. That's a relatively easy fight. They probably won't expend much there. They've got the rats. The rats are actually a bit more of a tough fight. That's a full moderate fight, so they will burn some resources there. So getting to the final area, right, they'll probably burn a little bit dealing with some damage from the brown mold. But I think, if I had to guess, they're going to make it to the final encounter with at least 50% of their resources remaining. So the final encounter can bring some heat, is what my planning is telling me. Is that when they get to the end, I can throw some spice their way, because, frankly, they will have enough left in the tank that they can take it. So this is me kind of engineering drama by including spicier encounters when I think they can handle them. So there's that. So what do I want to do with this? Here's what I'm envisioning. I'm envisioning a 3-stage encounter area. A combat, some puzzly stuff, and another combat. And I want to put 2 combats in the one room because I actually think that breaks up the pattern. Very oftentimes in dungeon design, it can be like, yep, you did this one thing in here, and now it's clearly safe, so do whatever you want and move on to the next room. Not so here. Remember, when they passed by the symbol vanishes. And I'm going to provide a version, by the way, for those of you who play this at home, with both maps on it, so you can just have them on top of each other and then delete the top one. The map itself will remain entirely unchanged, but the symbol will be gone. So you can very easily, when the players are distracted or doing something else, or you're on a different camera, just swap the maps, and the symbol will just vanish. Alternatively, I think I can give folks the symbol separately as a PNG, and then you can play with it however you want. Whatever you feel like doing. We'll figure it out. So, we've got this shadowy hunter. Now, this hunter, there's a sub-story going on here. And the sub-story is that it's clear that someone broke into this place a long time ago. They stole some choice things. They clearly wanted to steal some other things, but were unable to do so. And they left behind this trap. Now, it may not be readily apparent to the PCs that all these things are connected, but they are. The trap is a symbol that summons a shadowy hunter. And I want to get to talking about that here in a bit. I don't want to sit around and talk about its stats, but I haven't designed this creature yet. And it's going to be one of the new creatures in here. So I want to talk about it here today and let you all know where my headspace is going, and frankly, bounce thoughts if folks are like, you know what, you should do this. Well, we can chat about that. So let's talk about stage 1. So stage 1 is they get to the laboratory, and the laboratory is kind of a mess. It's been left unattended. There's an experiment that went awry centuries ago and is now just bubbled over into a bit of a mess. And by a bit of a mess, I mean a pair of oozes. I think that when they arrive, these need to be hidden. There's a little thing in encounter design that I like to do. It's not always the right call, but it's frequently the right call, which is have the monster wait to reveal itself until the PCs are fully in the room. Because nothing is kind of less fun than everyone's backed up in the previous room, the new room is filled with cool bells and whistles, but no one can experience it because they're trapped at the door because someone blew initiative, right? Or one of the monsters got a really high initiative. So it charges up to the door, and now the entire fight happens in, here. The last thing you want is the entire fight to happen in this staircase, right? Map Blair. Okay. The last thing you want to have happen is the entire fight happen in this staircase here, right? So, my thought here is that there's a large cauldron or some sort of vat, and that's where one of the oozes is. The other ooze is hiding under a table. These 2 oozes were created when the experiment went wrong, and they are 2 basically different components of some sort of alchemical concoction that went awry. So we've got a sewer ooze, which I'm going to use the stats for. That's just a level 1 ooze filled with garbage and trash. So that's not a particularly challenging monster. It's not nothing, but it's not incredibly hard. And then there is a slime mold, which is a level 2 ooze. That thing's a little bit more dangerous. It just has a lot of hit points and it's immune to crits. Doesn't hit super hard. You know, it's got a pseudopod that does a decent amount of damage. I think the bigger danger from it is it has a disease. So this will be the first time the players interact with the disease. But the disease is not going to kill anybody during this dungeon. It might become a problem if someone gets seriously sick by it later. But here in the dungeon, I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue. That said, I think the bigger issue is just that this thing has a ton of hit points. Its AC is trash, so they should be able to hammer on it pretty hard. But nonetheless, taking these two things together, a level 2 threat and a level 1 threat, that, you know, for a level 1 party, because they're definitely still going to be level 1 at this point, is 100 XP worth of challenge. I don't know if some of you follow me on social media. I talked last week that I officially declared that 100 XP worth of challenge was officially a spicy encounter. Moderate encounter is 80 XP. Severe encounter is 120. So spicy is 100. So this is a spicy encounter. Nothing they can't handle, but I do think it could provide a bit of a challenge. Now, in the back of my brain, I also know I want to tuck another fight into this without giving them too much time to rest between. So I think I want to give this fight a little bit of a tilt to the players, and I have an idea for this. I think what I might do is have the slime be the primary fight. That's the thing that kicks off the fight. The sewer ooze is trapped in some sort of containment. That containment breaks, say, on round 2. So what happens is the players get a whole round to deal with the one thing, maybe even most of the next round. Then at the end of round 2, the thing breaks and the sewer ooze gets out. Now, if they can hammer away at the slime mold fast enough, maybe they just get to do mop-up duty with the sewer ooze. Probably not. They'll probably still have to deal with both, but at least they'll get time to focus on one before the other one even comes to bear. That will certainly kind of take the gas off of this encounter a little bit. I wouldn't drop the XP award. They're still going to get 100 for it because they're still facing the challenges. But it probably will pose significantly less of a threat if they don't have to divide up their resources. Many of their resources will be committed to the slime mold by the time the sewer ooze even pops out. And they, you know, decent chance that they just ignore the sewer ooze until the slime mold is dead. Because it's bigger and more dangerous. Oh, we'll see. We'll see. But that's my current thought on step 1, is to kind of play with that. So it's a multi-stage threat. In that we've got 3 different stages of the entire encounter, but this first fight, even it has, you know, frankly, kind of 2 parts to it. I think that'll work out pretty well. I think that's how I'm going to write. Now, the next part is something I'm just not sure about yet. And this is the part that I'm kind of still working out. So what I don't want to have happen is the players to leave this room immediately. So there's some chambers here. Show these off. There's some chambers here. They're not fully decorated yet. I haven't put all the stuff in them yet. But one is kind of an office, and that's kind of coming along. And the other one's going to be an alchemical reagent kind of depository. And that should be pretty easy. You know, I can flesh that out without too much trouble. You know, if I go into here and I grab, you know, make sure I'm on the right layer. If I grab crates and barrels, I can easily start kind of filling this out without too much trouble. And sometimes I like to change their angle up a bit so that they're a bit more interesting. But yeah, I can easily kind of start adding things in there to make it an alchemy warehouse. But I don't want them to go off and explore those things just yet. Because ultimately, getting access to the office, the kind of Wulfren's study, getting access to that is how they open up the doorway that leads down to the vault. And the vault is really the end of part 1, because they can't access the vault yet. It is, in fact, the fact that they cannot access it is what triggers them needing to go into phase 2, which is trying to track down Wulfren's signet ring. So there's that. So I can't have them leaving this area just yet, and I kind of want to squeeze in another fight, at least if not directly in this area, as they're trying to leave this area or something like that. So what I need is the way is just blocked. It's closed. And I'm thinking that the best way to do that is to be like, well, the oozes, when they broke out, set off some sort of containment protocol. That basically Wulfren had some magic wards put in place that should any of his experiments go awry, it locks down some of the rooms of this place and prevents the dangerous thing from getting at his study, or worse, getting at the reagents, which would be a real problem. So the doors are locked. And that leads me to a puzzle, right? Because, okay, I want the players to engage with something that isn't just a fight down here. I think that's really important in any dungeon design. So I'm thinking a puzzle is the way to go. Now, the question is, what kind of puzzle do I do? I've got 3 options floating around in my head. And I see the value in all of them, or the advantage to all of them. But I think what I want to have happen is there's basically some sort of containment protocol, and to unlock the protocol, they either need to solve some sort of riddle that allows them to basically turn it off, solve some sort of puzzle that allows them to turn it off, or concoct something that they have to do to neutralize the danger, which allows it to turn off. Something along those lines. The MacGuffin aspect of it I'm less worried about than I am the actual puzzle itself. Because puzzles, well, they're tricky things. I think adding puzzles to a game is fun. I like having puzzles in my adventures, which is why if those of you who have seen the Pathfinder 2 beginner box, the intro adventure that's in there has a puzzle in it about weighing coins and trying to figure out their worth. That's me doing a simple, grade school puzzle, throwing it in there for funsies. I want this to kind of have a similar thing going on. Not obviously a weighing coin thing, but some other kind of puzzle. So here are the 3 things I'm playing around with in my head. I've been brainstorming and noodling with. We bounce it past all of you, see what you think, and then I'll spring it on some of my players in the next week. So one is this is the sand jar puzzle. And the way it works is that there are a whole bunch of jars filled with sand or reagents or whatever, but they're in discrete layers. And you can't spill any of them, because if you do, they'll be wasted. And you need to sort them out. You need to sort his alchemical reagents to get this catastrophe to unlock. And basically, it's a puzzle of trying to figure out how you pour things from one thing to the other to get them all to just be what they're supposed to be in their individual jars. You're basically unsorting them. It's real hackneyed, but it is kind of a cutesy little puzzle game that you can do. And the way to do it is basically to say that each bottle contains 5 layers in it. The layers can be duplicate, right? So it can be blue, 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 green, red, and then the next one's red, green, blue, red, red, right? Whatever. And basically you've got a little room in some of the jars, and you have to pour things around to get it to be all uniform. It's a trial and error puzzle. You really can't go too wrong. But it's pretty basic. I don't really know how well it ties into the theme of this, but that's a thought. Another one is kind of a rotating glyph pattern, in which I would probably create some sort of puzzle with glyphs that are rotating rings, and you have to turn them in such a way to get the glyphs to line up. This is more like a combination lock kind of puzzle. Now, this is a harder thing to do in Roll20. I think I could probably do it, but I would have to accept the fact that there are only 8 positions that a thing can be rotated, because if you look at... I'll show you a little thing here. Let me pop back over to Roll20. I'm doing this in Roll20. So I've got this tile. It only has 8 configurations. It can be like this, be like that, and you can keep rotating it around. So there are 8 positions it can be in. That does, to some extent, limit the possibilities of the puzzle. But I think there's something there, especially if you did interlocking kind of concentric pieces that you had to decide which one was in which configuration and they overlapped each other or something like that. I think that is a possibility. It certainly makes more sense with the theme of the dungeon, but I actually think of the three, this is kind of the least appealing one that also requires the largest amount of work. Yeah, it's kind of a clock position puzzle. You can think of it that way. I think of it more like if you think of it if you had a circular piece of paper that you cut into rings like an onion, and then but there was a pattern on it, and then you rotated all the rings. So you had to figure out what position each ring had to be in to make the symbol make sense. So it's not a very hard puzzle unless you make it so that there's like two of them and the pieces are not attached. So the players have to take the pieces and decide which ones go on which side. They have to kind of make some value judgment that way to determine what they have to sort the pieces and then solve the puzzle. That's at least a little bit more complicated. But still, I don't think this is a particularly hard puzzle. Now, that said, not like the puzzle has to be hard. But it should be something that is at least kind of interesting. Something that makes them think, and not just their characters. Although I do always like to, I should stress, I do always like to include things that their characters can do to give themselves hints and things like that. Right? That's like, oh, well, you're really good at, the occult, and this is a weird alchemical occult ritual, so sure, make a check, and I'll give you a hint or something, or you get one piece of the puzzle solved, and then that makes it easier to solve the rest of it. Things like that. Because I do think it's important that when you provide a puzzle, you understand that the players' characters may be better at them than the players themselves are, and you should always allot for that and give them away. So there's that. Now, there's one more. Ooh. And this one is what they need to do to get the alarm to disable is they need to do the correct experiment. They have to complete the experiment. And to do that, they basically have kind of a reagent worksheet formula, and they need to figure out what quantities of each reagent they're supposed to end up with. And, so basically the way to do it is to treat it like some sort of math puzzle. So, they have a bunch of quantities, and they've got all these different reagents, and they can do it in a whole bunch of different ways. And if they do it in the right way, they can create the kind of right formula. Now, to this end, I'm thinking not necessarily of like a Sudoku style math puzzle, but something similar to that, where like, it's just digging around looking at various math and algebra puzzles. But something where it's like, you have the numbers 1 through 9, you have to use all of them, but they have to be used in such a way that they create that each one's only used once, and all of the formulas in like a crossword style kind of thing are correct. And there's probably only one configuration in which that is possible, because there's multiplication in there and things like that. But yeah, that I've been playing around with a math schema on that. Oh, you can't even see that. That's the green screen is totally okay. There, you can kind of see that. Where it's like a grid of all of them, but there's pluses and equals, and it all needs to make some amount of sense. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of right now, is that I kind of like the last one for like the math and alchemy angle of it, but I also realize that may be the hardest one for folks to solve, because it requires kind of deductive reasoning, right? If you're using, for example, like if you're using all 9 numbers and one of those formulas is a multiplication formula, there's automatically a whole bunch of numbers that cannot be in there, right? For example, the number 1 cannot be in the multiplication line, because if it was, the other number would have to be in that line twice, because 1 times whatever is going to be whatever, right? So 1 cannot be in there. And then you start going, well, what 2 numbers can you multiply and end up with a number that is 9 or less? And your answer is 2, 3, and 4. So the multipliers have to be 2 times 3 or 2 times 4. Those are the only 2 formulas that fit in there, which means the answer has to be 6 or 8. So now you've automatically kind of eliminated a bunch of the things from the equation, and then you just work the math backwards from there. So my point is, I like it because there is an element to it that is clever and tricky to solve. But it's by no means impossible, right? It just requires you to sit down and think about it. And I believe there's even 2 answers, because you can go either direction and say it's 2 times 3 equals 6 or 2 times 4 equals 8 and still get it to work in both directions. But you need to be able to get to that point first, which requires you to identify that the multiplication formula is the hardest one to solve, because you can subtract almost any 2 of those numbers and get one of the other numbers, almost. You can add a whole bunch of them together to get a third number. Not all of them, but a lot of them. But what you can't do is multiply 2 of them. And you're also pretty limited if you do division as well, because it has to be a round number. So I am thinking that might be the way to go, but I'm not sold on it yet. I don't know. So that's kind of what I'm playing with. I think if I go with the sand jar kind of puzzle, where it's like, okay, you've got, 5 jars, one of which is empty. The other 4 all have layers of sand in them, up to 5, but sometimes it's multiple colors in a row, so it looks like one larger block. And you have to figure out a way to unsort them by pouring them from one jar to the other, to get it so that all 5 colors are each in their own jar. It's an interesting puzzle. I don't know how much people are going to love it, but it is certainly an interesting puzzle. So there's that. And to build that puzzle, I would just do it in reverse. I'd end up with, here are all of them in the way that they're supposed to be, and then you figure out how to unmake that. Right, how you turn it from that back into something that is a mess. And you can end up doing an awful lot of steps there. So that could be a very complicated puzzle that could ultimately be very frustrating, because if you go down the wrong road, you just won't be able to solve it. But you can always backtrack too, so it is what it is. The second puzzle is a rotating glyph puzzle. This one is just kind of a play with the physical pieces. If you're actually playing in person, you could print these out and let the players play with them. I like it for the tactile element of it. I have certainly done that in the past. And then there's the third puzzle, which is just a math algebra puzzle of like trying to figure out what reagents you need and what quantities to brew the final concoction that allows you to pour it on the seal to get the emergency seals to unlock, right? I'll words this better, I swear. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I see folks saying, hey, leave it based on the GM. I mean, I could include 3 different puzzles in here, but frankly, for brevity, I'll probably only include 1. Maybe I will type up all 3 of them and just throw the other 2 in Discord for folks to play with if they want. But I think I'm going to stick with 1. Now, the sand puzzle's fun. I do agree with that, but that is the one that I have the hardest time being like, yeah, that's why, because the experiment mixed up reagents. It's one of those things where it's just like, I don't know why that relates to shutting down the security kind of system, the magical wards that are locking the doors and preventing anything from leaving the room. So the sand puzzle is the one that I think, I think is the one that players will most easily be able to play around with. But I also would have to figure out a way to represent that in Roll20 in a way that wouldn't drive me mad. I think I can do it. I think the way to do it would be to create kind of jar illustrations and then just have blocks of color that I move. Maybe. So I think that's certainly a possible special edition. Yeah, that's it. The special edition is just like, there's not one puzzle, there's 3. Screw you. It's harder. All right. Well, suffice to say, I think the right answer here is to give it some thought and continue playing around with it. I mean, there is a possibility here too that maybe the correct answer is let the playtesters monkey around with them and see which one, try one with one group, try a different one with the other group, get their feedback on which, figure out which one felt more satisfying. I do think the math one is one that, there's the standard challenge whenever you put a puzzle in an adventure that one player just takes over and runs the whole thing, right? I mean, that is so. Anyway, I'll give it some thought. If you have thoughts about it, leave them for me in the Discord. I'll be happy to chat with folks about them there. But I think we'll move on. So, one way or the other, they'll solve this. They'll unlock the doors, and they'll be able to kind of go into the study, go into the reagent storage, and they'll be able to start doing that. But that is when, I think this is when the shadowy hunter is going to attack them. So up to this point, the thing disappeared, and then it starts slowly stalking them, and they get some checks to kind of notice and feel like they're being watched up to this point, but nothing makes itself apparent here until the very end. And here at the end, when they kind of finish off their encounters and start going to do other things, the shadow hunter sleeks out of the shadows and tries to attack. And I think this is really key because I think, first of all, I think this should be a very, very difficult creature. I'm honestly thinking that it's possibly as high as level 4. But in this fight in particular, it's not there to fight the whole party. As a matter of fact, the moment the whole party starts ganging up on it, it flees. Not because it, thinks it's going to lose, but because it's not ready for the final confrontation yet. So it is easily driven away by large sources of light, because it is a shadowy hunter creature. But it is kind of something that is there, and I want it to kind of come out, do some real damage to the party, and then flee the moment they do anything back to it at all. So what I want it to be is a moment of kind of menace and terror where they have no idea whether or not they can take this thing. But the moment they manage to even scratch it up a bit, it flees and becomes kind of a looming threat that they're going to have to deal with later. Frankly, also, when they're high enough level to actually... Right now, they are not. So this hunter thing lurks down here. It's going to be stalking them up to this point, and then it's going to show back up. Now, I don't want to walk through all my aspects of creature design, because I actually think a lot of this is covered very well in the P2 books. The Game Mastery Guide and whatnot covers creature creation very well. And frankly, that's what I use to make creatures. However, I do want to talk about what I think some of its special abilities should be, because I think this is where it's going to be the most interesting. So, for reference, my art that I'm going to order for this, because this is one of the pieces that's going to get a piece of art, is vaguely, it's kind of a cross between like a big cat and a lean dog in shape, but its form is kind of blurry and indistinct, as if it's made from wisps of shadow. So its form is kind of really distorted and kind of all over the place. And it is capable of kind of squeezing through areas like oil, and then remaking itself as it kind of hunts and stalks through the shadows. I think this thing is going to have wisps of shadowy darkness that it can swipe out at folks with. I'm trying to make sure I stay away from Displacer Beast territory, obviously. It's not going to have any displacement kind of abilities. but I do think it will have kind of oily tendrils that it can whip out at people with. That probably come out of its mouth or something creepy like that instead of its back. So I'm thinking one of its abilities is that is its primary way of attacking, is that it has these oily tendril wisps that it kind of swipes out at people with. I also think it has an aura of shadow that it kind of emanates from itself that blots out light, making it dark so that it can see better and they cannot. That's one of its defensive abilities. And then finally, I think it can fire like blasts of like shadow at you. It can like spit them at you. And here's the thing that's really interesting. I think they end up orbiting you like a penumbrist's motes. And if you are a penumbrist, you can even use them as motes. So I think there's something really interesting going on there. I don't want to quite go into why I think all of these things are related. I mean, obviously, other than the fact that they're both shadow creatures. But I do think this hunter thing is going to come in stalking the party. And it's going to be kind of bent on getting some vengeance for these intruders, because that's what it's been programmed to do, right? It doesn't... You can't reason with it or bargain with it. It's a hunter. So I think this thing is going to kind of spring out at them, swipe at them a bit, do some damage, and then the moment they bring bright light to bear, because it's going to be casting the entire room in shadow, the moment they bring bright light to bear, the thing freaks out and flees, because it doesn't know how to deal with it. It's not fully grown yet enough. So I think that's the plan. And once they're done with that, obviously that's what leads into kind of them being able to finish their exploration of the study. After it tries to drag someone off and fails to do so, the party can kind of huddle together and make sure it's gone. It will not make another appearance in this part of the adventure, and they can finish their exploration and open the vault. That is the end of part 1. So I've been talking a lot of this out with all of you. I had a couple notes here just because I did put a little bit of thought into this, but I actually think that this has been very helpful for me to actually formalize the words on some of this stuff and get some of it going. So thank you for coming to my impromptu brainstorm. Does anybody have any last minute questions? I got to wrap this up here in just a few to get ready for my next Twitch stream. But if anybody has any questions here in the last minute or two, I'll be happy to answer them. The next stream we will be doing for Eventide is a week from today, and that should be a full wrap-up of 2 sessions. So next week we're probably going to be looking at part 2 in pretty good detail. They may even make it to this encounter. I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but they might get pretty close. Umbral Hound, that's not a bad name. I do want to stay away from Shadow Mastiff, because this is a very different thing. The Shadow Mastiff is not what I want it to be. I mean, it could be that this is just my re-envisioned Shadow Mastiff. I have to check the OGL requirements on that. I mean, why reinvent it? But I do like Umbral Hound. That's pretty good. Shadow Stalker might not be bad. There's a bunch of names I could go with. I'll play around with it, though. That's not a bad idea. Umbral Hound. So, yeah. That's what we're doing. All right, folks. Well, I want to thank you all for being patrons. Obviously, your support means the world to me. This is the end of May. Today is the last day of May, which means tomorrow is the first day of June. I'm excited because I have totally sold out of all 20 of the Eventide Lord slots. Those are all gone now. I'm not opening up anymore right now because I don't want to commit myself to too many words a month. That means I owe 2,000 words a month to my various patrons. Should they decide to use it. Some of you are actually probably growing to the point where you've got 300 or 400 words. We're getting close to folks being able to ask for an archetype or something if they want. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, avoiding Shadow Mastiff is a good idea. Yeah, that's what we got going on. That is it. So I'm going to run the credits here in just a moment. So for those of you who are not yet in the credits, I update the credits on the first of every month once Patreon done doing its magic. So by the next time we stream, we'll have it updated. So thank you for watching, everybody. This has been a blast as always. Thank you for your support, and we will see you. Well, many of you will see here in just a few minutes over on Twitch. But the rest of you, we will see next week, Tuesday, for another Eventide stream. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.